Passage from Isaiah is written to people who are, as it says, in darkness, in deep darkness. It certainly is a metaphor for discouragement, for a sense of defeat, for a sense of isolation, for a sense of forsakenness and abandonment. The people to whom this is written are the people who have returned to Israel after the captivity in Babylon, and they've returned to essentially a bombed out city where they're getting no help, no resources, no cooperation from the people living there. Think of Puerto Rico after the hurricane. Think of Haiti after the earthquake. It's a people that are overwhelmed by the task ahead of them, the lack of resources, the lack of energy. I went to New Orleans 6 months after Hurricane Katrina, and it was literally overwhelming. The amount of trash, just getting rid of stuff so that the rebuilding could start. And then the lack of resources and the heat, God, putting on those suits so you wouldn't get mold, and the masks you had to wear and so on. It was hellish in the heat and humidity of New Orleans. You really do feel this sense of lostness, that there is darkness and nobody cares and nobody is paying attention, and you just don't know where to go next and how to rebuild. That's the situation for the people who are in darkness. And then the word comes. Arise, shine, your light has come. Look around you. The light of the Lord is upon you, and the glory of the Lord is upon you. And if I were them, I would say, I don't have the energy to stand up. I don't see any light. And the word is, it's not your light, John. It's the light of God, and the light of God will be reflected upon you from God. And the glory of God will give you the energy to get up. And then the scene just becomes dramatic in Isaiah. It moves from this darkness and this sense of isolation and aloneness and forsakenness, and that nobody cares, to look around you, use the light to see what's going on. Nations are bringing wealth to you. The riches of the sea will come to you. Gold and frankincense will come to you. Nations will stream to you. They will see you, and you will be important, and you might be the most important in the world. All these resources, all these trucks from Home Depot and from Lowe's are coming. All these helpers, all these carpenters and electricians are going to be laying the foundation for your new city. Stand up. Be encouraged. One of the great lines, I think, in this Isaiah passage of encouragement is, look, your sons are coming back. Your daughters are being carried in their nurses' arms. And one of the things that the Jews suffered in this Babylonian captivity is the separation of families. People got separated from their parents, from their children, from their grandparents. And that just furthers the sense of isolation and darkness and abandonment. Look, your children are being returned to you. I mean, we know what that means for Guatemalans at the border. We know what that means for Syrians in refugee camps. We know what that means for anybody in a refugee camp. The light has come. Your children are being returned. You're being reunited. It's good news. Stand up. Feel good about this. There is, in this Isaiah passage, something of a reversal. That those who have been forgotten, abandoned, lost at the bottom are now on the top. The light has shone on them, and people now see them and can't ignore them, and people are attracted to their light. 30 years ago this week, the conference sent me on a fact-finding trip with some others to Central America. We went to Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Then, as now, that area was in great turmoil. This week, 30 years ago this week, we flew into Tegucigalpa, the capital of Honduras. It was a night flight. There was a full moon. We knew we were flying into Tegucigalpa because that's what the pilot said. Prepare for landing at the Tegucigalpa airport. And I looked outside the window, and you know, when it's night and you land in Columbus, there are lots of lights. And you can see the cars on the highway, and you can see the lights in the parking lots. It's just brilliant with light. And the thing about flying into Tegucigalpa, you knew there was a city down there. It's the capital. But there wasn't hardly any light. The people were in darkness. You had a sense there was something down there, but it was dark, and great darkness covered the earth. And we landed, and we went to our lodging, and the next morning we went out and toured the city. And I realized why we didn't see any light when we landed. These hills where the people live have no electricity. They use lumber to build their houses. They also use garbage to build their houses. And their heat for cooking and for light comes from wood on the mountainside. And they've cut down many trees for housing and heat and cooking, so that when it rains, there's nothing to hold the houses, and they suffer mudslides. And it happens all the time. And the poor get poorer. And I thought, these are people that are in darkness, in great darkness, and nobody's looking at them and nobody's paying attention. And I thought, what if a great light shone on them? What if the world saw what's going on? What if somehow the light was so bright on Tegucigalpa that the world came to them for answers? That the world streamed to them with its goods so they could build and have light and have food and have housing and have schools and have jobs. What if the world came to them with all of its resources and they were on top? How would they feel? Would they say, we've got ours, forget you? Would they be arrogant? Would they be greedy? Would they say, our time has come, forget you? You can live in darkness now? How would the rest of the world feel? Would we feel bitter? Would we be hateful? Would we want to take what they have? When I read this Isaiah passage about the light shining on those who are on the bottom, When I read this Isaiah passage about the wealth of the world coming to them, the gold and the frankincense, what did they do with it? What did they do with it? Did they say, good for us? What did they do with the light that shone on them, that enabled them to see the world? Did they say, forget the world? What did they do? Often how we relate to each other can be expressed in how we obtain things and how we treat things. How we relate to our neighbor has to do with how we obtain things. And there are three ways that we can obtain things. The first way is we take. We take the land. We take the goods. We take the gold. We take the oil. We take. And we say, it's ours. And you can't have it. You can't have the light. It's mine. Sometimes that's how we relate to people. It's mine and you can't have it. Another way we obtain things is through getting. This is quid pro quo, and this is how most relationships are. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. It's an exchange. It's a contract. You want some of the light? What do you give me for some of the light? What will you do to get some of the light? You can have it, but there are conditions on it. Give me something, and I'll give it to you. Most of our relationships are that way. You want to be loved? What are you going to do for me? Yeah. You want mercy? What are you going to do for me? Another way we obtain things is through receiving. They are given to us and we receive them. Things are shared. You want light? I'll share it with you. You want love? I'll share it with you. You want mercy? I'll share it. This is grace. This is grace. And we can relate to people this way also. The light that shone on those people who were in darkness, they had the choice not to share it, to trade for it, or to share it. And I think the light that God gives is not only a bright light that shines on those on the bottom, not only shines on those in the darkness, that bright light that God gives is also the light of a bright idea. It's an idea that we no longer relate in terms of what we can take from our neighbor. We no longer relate in terms of what we can get from our neighbor, but we now relate in terms of what we share with our neighbor. That's the bright light and the brilliant idea that God has. This is the Sunday. This Sunday has been designated as Resistance Sunday. I don't like it, that title, but by many groups that are pushing and advocating full inclusion in the United Methodist Church. Churches that support full inclusion have been asked to say that they support full inclusion. Okay, we support now. But I got to thinking about this in terms of the light. The light. And the church can say, and in a sense it has said, we have the light of God's love, and we're not going to share it with all people. And that needs to be resisted. The church can also say, we have the light of God's love, and we'll share it with people on the condition that they change and become like us. You do something for me, I'll do something for you. And that needs to be resisted. And the church can say, we have the light, and we're going to share it with all peoples, because it's not our light. It's God's light. And it's not our love, it's God's love. And how the church is going to relate to people is by sharing the light and the love to such an extent that we no longer know who's on top and who's on bottom and who's inside and who's outside, because the light is so bright it's abolished all of those distinctions and all of those lines. And God's love is just there for all. And that's the church we want. And that's the church we work for. When we take communion, we don't take communion. We receive it. The bread is broken, and it is given. You receive the bread. We don't take God's love to hoard it. We don't get God's love by making a deal with God. We receive God's love as grace freely given to us. And that which we receive, we share with others so that they can be in the light also. This is Epiphany Sunday, which means shining through. It means the shining through of God. God appears. And God appears as light in our darkness, for our alienation, for our feeling forsaken, for our feeling alone. And God shines on us so that we can be seen and we can see. But God also uses the light to give us the bright idea that God's love is to be shared, and that light is for all people. May it be so.